Hello, everyone, and a warm welcome to the Conscious Eating Evolution series. I'm Karina, Conscious Eating Catalyst and Soul Relationship Guide, and have created this series to give you a more holistic overview around the transformative power of food, so you feel more enabled and empowered to make healthier and more mindful choices for yourself and this planet. And today's amazing guest is Marc Buckley, who is an official UN SDG advocate, social innovation, climate change, agriculture, food and beverage expert network member of the World Economic Forum, global food reformist and sustainable futurist. On top, he is the country coordinator for Al Gore's Climate Reality Project in Germany and Austria, and an international speaker on the climate crisis. Marc is truly on a mission to empower billions of global citizens to live an adaptive lifestyle of health and sustainability within planetary boundaries. Marc, I'm super grateful and happy having you here today.
It's so wonderful to see you again, Karina. It's great to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, so I love, because I'm working more from bottom up, so working with people on behavioral change, and you are working more from top down, really encouraging big companies to transition and reform the system. I'm really excited to talk to you about changing the food system and how we can actually do this. But before we go into that, I would love you to share a little bit more about yourself. What really brought you into the mission of wanting to make such a big impact on the food system and becoming a leader in this field?
Great, I appreciate it. Yeah, I can tell you right now, I wasn't struck by lightning. I'm not a climate refugee. I've never seen God or been in any kind of catastrophe to say, wow, that was the aha moment where I changed. It's a true transformation over time. So it's taken many years and lots of progress to make a transition to where I am now, and the people I speak with all over the world about not only climate change and the environment and global food reform, but just this transition. There's no one real aha moment. And just so you kind of know a little bit about my background, you mentioned all the titles and things I do, and that's wonderful. But I come from 6 generations of Germany's largest organic farmers. It's a family business called Erlenhof, and they're Germany's largest organic farmers and Europe's 3rd largest organic farmers, and about 19,000 retail establishments throughout Europe. And I come from 4 generations of hydroponic farmers, which is basically the original hanging gardens of Babylon. So hydroponics, hydroculture, things like that. And so I have a lot of experience with family businesses as far as organics, food, agriculture, food and beverages go. And part of our sister companies of Erlenhof were wine orchards, cherry orchards, and apple orchards. So we made our own drinks. So I had the fortunate opportunity to see how to process and make drinks, which are very vital for our nourishment. And so it's been a long process. I'm 48 years old now, and have seen and spoke a lot about this. But one other mentor I need to mention, you mentioned him as well, is Al Gore. One of the first 50 climate leaders to be trained by Al Gore in his ranch in Carthage, Tennessee, as a climate speaker and climate leader. And with that mix of the environment and the climate and that training, and the mix of the family businesses in Germany as far as doing agriculture, food and beverages, I just saw how everything kind of fits in this big ecosystem. And the part that I saw is that we're talking about food and nourishment and drink, which is our battery, our energy source. It's Maslow's hierarchy of needs, the pyramid of needs. The bottom 2 layers are about breathing, food, and water is what makes our engine run, which makes us healthy and grow. And so that's also the biggest thing that needs to be fixed to solve the crisis as we see in our world today.
Absolutely. So I would love you to talk a little bit about why you see food as such a powerful force to really create an impact of change in the world.
Because everybody eats, hopefully a couple times a day. Sometimes we fast and do intermittent fasting. Currently, right now, it's Ramadan, so a lot of people are fasting the entire month, only eating early mornings and evenings. But food is our energy source. It's the most vital thing, and it's a connection to everything in our world. And I'm talking about a very complex, multifaceted kind of ecosystem that deals with finite resources on our planet, how we grow and harvest products, how we produce them, how we package them, how we transport them, and then how we consume them. And then also with the consumption is what goes to waste either from the farm or with the end consumer, that is creating an exponential problem towards our greenhouse gas emissions and our climate, because we're exponentially wasting finite resources, but we're also exponentially creating greenhouse gas emissions from the waste of those products. So you probably heard the statistic before that 30% of every food and beverage that is produced in the world is thrown away. It never makes it to the table. It's never eaten and consumed. And that 30% needs to be put into perspective. Most people see that 30% as, wow, a big number and it's crazy, but it's an exponential problem. So not only is the marketing, the labor, the transport, the emissions, the finite resources in that 30% gone to waste, but there's three top ways in our world how we get rid of food waste. And the first way is to bury it. The second way is to burn it. And the third way is to throw it in our oceans. Doesn't matter about the other two ways we get rid of it, because the number one way, by burying it, is the worst way possible, because when you bury food unpackaged or in a package, it turns into methane. It aggregates. And methane is 70 times more effective at trapping heat than CO2. So now you just take a 30% food waste worldwide, you bury the big majority of that, it turns into methane, and you've got a 70x problem of greenhouse gas emissions, which is an exponentially growing problem, and it's creating a lot around climate change. So that's kind of just touching the surface of why we need to get our food system in order and get things figured out and see it as a multifaceted problem. The one last thing to put in our consciousness and to be aware of is the world's most successful and oldest and running economy is an agrarian society. It's 12,000 years old. Mm-hmm. It's the most successful, well-functioning. It's the way cities and cultures were built, on agriculture, on farming. It's an agrarian society. It's the world's oldest economy. And it hasn't seen very much innovation, efficiency, or sustainable developments in the last 12,000 years. In all those years, and even if we just look at the Industrial Revolution, there's been three major innovations: some mechanization, some automation, CRISPR-Cas9, HPP, and PEF technologies that have come out in the food production industry that have kind of been innovations, but they haven't really taken off to help the industry get out of the dark ages into a modern, more efficient way of producing sustainable, resilient, healthy food for all of us.
So you already mentioned a couple of the problems within the food system. Can you tell us a little bit more about what really are the mechanisms that are not working well, or that we really need to change?
Well, right now there's a big shift, and actually since the Paris Agreement in 2015 from the United Nations, where we agreed to keep the planet below 1.5 degrees of warming, the world came together for the first time. And since that, we've seen some exponential growth. And in the discussions on climate change, But in the last 2 to 3 years, we've seen an exponential growth in the discussions on agriculture, food, and beverages and how it affects climate. And now those discussions are really turning even more. And I sent you a report today in an article, but it's the IPCC report, which stands for the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change report, which came out the end of last year, or the beginning of this year, or last year, the end of last year, sorry. And it had a big section in there on how agriculture really affects the climate. We've been in the past kind of led to believe that the oil, coal, and gas industry were the major contributors for climate change and greenhouse gas emissions. But it's actually the agriculture, food, and beverage industry that's the #1 cause of greenhouse gas emissions, human suffering, and climate change. And we need to fix it. And kind of the problems are being seen in these reports, that there's this more awareness that people see what an impact this industry has on climate change, how we need to be more sustainable and resilient in our production of the food. And then there was a super report that came out this year in January, around the 15th or 17th of January. The Eat Lancet Commission came out with the pinnacle report on food in the Anthropocene. And it's a 3+ year report done by the EAT Foundation, the EAT Forum, which is the forum for food, just like the COP is the forum for climate change, and the World Economic is for finance and for economics. The EAT Forum is that for the forum, the International Organization for Food. And they came out with this report with the Lancet Commission of all these scientists that say it has a big effect on our planetary boundaries and our climate. And it's not just one thing. You just can't say, this is the one area that we need to fix, and then it resolves the whole thing. It's a multifaceted, very complex systems view where you have to kind of do everything at once. And that's hard for people to grasp, because it's a means that we need to think in systems. They're all around us. It's part of our body. It's part of our world. And if we understand that, it's easy to do, but we need to kind of get away from this linear lateral approach of seeing the world into more of this complexity, seeing things in system and how everything really ties together. And so those are some of the reports. I think the #1 way to globally reform food, and just to kind of say it shortly, how to fix the entire problem, is really to change the way we produce food. It's not about the food tribes or how you eat or how you consume or how you throw away your package that truly will make the difference. It's how we produce the food that'll make the biggest difference in the world. If we produce food resiliently and sustainably, it's virtually impossible to not produce food that is also healthy, good for the planet, doesn't create greenhouse gases, doesn't do packaging damage, doesn't do transportation damage through emissions, and it's also good for our health, and it's good all the way around. And so if you understand how that sustainable development works, that cradle to cradle life cycle, that circular economy on how you produce, you realize that the products that come out at the end are much better for everyone and our planet. So that's part of it. And then as a United Nations Sustainable Development Goal advocate, what most people also don't know is I'll tell them that I'm an advocate, and they'll say, oh, that's great. I like #1. It's red. It's my favorite color, no poverty. And I love the SDGs, and that's the one I'm working on. But people need to understand that all 17 of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, they're all tied to agriculture, food, and beverages. And 11 of them are tied intensively to agriculture, food, and beverage industry. But actually all of them touch on it. And I'm not talking just a little paragraph. I'm talking volumes and volumes of data and information on how these SDGs are tied to our global food system. And if people understand that and they see the similarity of those SDGs in that system to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and our basic needs being breathing, food, and water, and our resources on our planet, we can understand how to fix this problem. And there's no better way, and I'm very positive and optimistic about it. Who doesn't love to eat? Who doesn't love to eat good food, you know? So that's the best way to solve the problem. And I think that's where we need to have our focus. And that's also where the focus is shifting with these organizations, these international organizations who are coming up with this data.
Mm. So when you talk about sustainability, because I think it's like a wordly well-used word, which often is used as a buzzword in many ways as well, I would love you to really give us your perspective of what sustainability really means to you.
Great, I can do that. So sustainability really has many different definitions. Even within the United Nations, there's many definitions. But for me, and for the businesses I speak with, and for the people I work with, sustainability means to be around for future generations. It means to, whether you're a family, it means that your family is around for future generations, to sustain that life, to sustain that living, to sustain those things for future generations. If you're a business, to be sustainable means that you can pay your employees in the future. You can pay to buy raw goods and to produce products in the future. And if you think short term and you only think in the now, and you only think on how you produce bad products for the cheapest amount that have the biggest impact on our planet, then you're not going to be around in the future. But if you think long term, how can I do efficient things that don't damage our planet so that it can have plenty of resources in the future, produce products that are healthy, and that means to be sustainable around for many, many generations, and well beyond my generations of lifetime. And I say well beyond 2050 to be sustainable. There's one caveat to sustainability, and there's a book that was written in 1972. It's called The Limits to Growth. It was written by Donella Meadows, Dennis Meadows, Jorg Randers, and Mr. Behrens. And basically, it said that we've gone beyond the limits to growth. We've used up the finite resources, and we've gone beyond these limits to growth. And last year, August 1st, was Earth Overshoot Day. What that means is that on August 1st, the world had gone beyond the finite resources it needs to live throughout the rest of the year, and we were living in a deficit or a credit on resources we really don't have. You've probably heard that if we all lived like Americans, we would need 5 planets worth of resources, or if we lived like Germans, where I live, that we need 3 planets worth of resources. We don't have 5 planets. We don't have 3 planets. We have 1 planet. And so we can't run in a deficit. And so by understanding how that works, and that deficit and what those things mean, it's really important to understand how we can attack and tackle the problems. It's really easy to understand if you kind of see the world in a different way as yourself being part of the ecosystem, part of a bigger system.
I love
Did that answer your question? Or?
Yes, definitely. Gave good insight.
The one last thing I was touching upon that I probably left out here is with the sustainability. I said that the book said that we've gone beyond the limits to growth, and that we're Earth Overshoot Day. And so there's a new word that emerged a few years ago, and it's called resilience. And that's a word that I wanted to touch on for you. Is resilience has sustainability in it. It has to be sustainable in it. If you're resilient, that means it doesn't matter how what happens tomorrow, what climate catastrophe happens tomorrow, what hurricane, what drought, what flood happens tomorrow, your business, your family, your life in Germany or in America is one of resilience, that no matter what the surrounding environment is, whether it's temperature or climate catastrophe, you will be resilient to live beyond that. And sustainability is within resilience. And if we do sustainable development, that's built into resilience. And there's also 3 definitions to resilience. There's a mental resilience, so emotional, a mental state of resilience, so that if somebody calls you bad names or you're abused or something, there's that mental resilience. But then there's the resilience that I'm talking about, that or that I'm kind of most people talk about, is that you can live in the future. You can make sure that no matter what it looks like outside, you're still around. You're resilient, whether you're a business, a family, a country, a city, that whatever climate catastrophe happens, you're prepared and you're going to be able to live through that. But if you looked in the past 10 years, all the films that have come out and this TV series that show the future, they're all very dystopian. They all look very dark and gray and sci-fi, people wearing masks, and it looks like Mad Mask or Mad Max, or they're wearing spacesuits or oxygen masks. That's not the resilience I'm talking about. That type of resilience means you'll be around, but you're living like a Martian or a space person or someone with horrific dystopian conditions here on our planet. For me, I don't want that. I want to live in a resilient, beautiful, and sustainable planet, one where you can breathe the air, where trees grow and plants grow, where we're capturing carbon, where our planet is regenerating and dealing well as an ecosystem with itself. And I call that resilient, desirable futures. And so that resilience and that resilience is possible, but to have it be really beautiful in the future, so you can walk in the park and you can be outside and just enjoy life, instead of saying, oh, the acid rain, I've got to wear a gas mask, let's put on the spacesuits. That's not the resilience I'm talking about. I'm talking one that I remember from my childhood, or that my grandparents told me about from their childhood, where they were walking in nature and there was no garbage and the air was clean and it was good. So.
I love that you shared that. I think that's very important. And you yourself are actually as well a business owner. And I would love you to talk about your Aloha Eco Center, because I think it is such a great example of how you really can transition and change how we produce food.
Gladly. So it's the Aloha Eco Center, and Aloha stands for something very unique, but you might be familiar with aloha, which is the Hawaiian term, but aloha is kind of a play on words as well, and it stands for Adaptive Lifestyle of Health and Sustainability. That's what aloha stands for, and it's an eco center because it's really an ecological system addressing all the facets of food production, energy production, living, transport, in one unit. So it's this really ecological center. Right now we're looking at 3 different facilities in the world, in Barcelona, Spain, and Haida, just north of Hamburg, Germany, and a place called Schleswig-Holstein, and close to Venice, and a place called Roncaldo, Italy, but part of a project with H Farm. H Farm's a beautiful location for, H stands for humans, and this Aloha Eco Center is basically a different form of production. So what we do is we use renewable energy. So we use solar, and we use wind, and we use hydrogen power. And then we back that up to Tesla Power Pack 2s into a battery backup. And then we do gray water recycling, rainwater recycling, ambient water harvesting, black water recycling, and a total water management system, so that we're not using groundwater or finite resources in part of our production, because water is a scarcity, but the benefit, there are no benefits of climate change, but because of climate change, there's more moisture in the air, there's more humidity in the air, it's warmer, that's why the storms are bigger. And so in those areas where we have that, we really try to use ambient water harvesting and rainwater harvesting to the max so that we can use that to produce food. A lot of the rainwater in our world now just doesn't get back into that cycle of the watershed, the 10,000 years or however many years it takes to get back into that natural groundwater flow cycle, because it's been disrupted of how we live and build buildings and things. And so what I've done is this complete system using non-finite resources to get the energy I need to produce food. And then I do what the buzzword is called vertical farming, but there's a more scientific or more proper name for it. It's called controlled environmental agriculture. So it's a closed system on multi levels where we use horticulture LED lights and no soil to grow food. And we do 12 different plant species. And then we use that ambient water harvesting, rainwater harvesting to produce beverages. We do cold pressed juices and smoothies and drinks. We do waters, but then we also do 12 plant species, and we make raw bars and produce all types of food products without the use of finite resources or greenhouse gas emissions in the process. Then we have a specific type of logistics on how we transport our products to different places by using semi-trucks from Tesla and electric vehicles or other methods of transportation that don't either have a carbon swapping or greenhouse gas emission reduction, or are electric vehicles in some way so that they're very locally or regionally, or that they don't have a big footprint in the transportation. Then we sell all sorts of little products for the individual, because if you're standing in front of this big, huge production facility and you say, wow, this is great, but what can I do in my apartment? What can I do with my parents at home? Or what can I do in my little house with my family? Mm-hmm. We want those people to be empowered to live off the grid too, to show them tools and tricks to do that in their house. So there's a little ambient water harvesting machine that's called the Halo, and it's about the size of a smaller coffee machine, and it harvests 2.5 liters of water every day just from the water in the surrounding air. It's like a dehumidifier, if any of those who lived in humid areas and had a dehumidifier in their basement to get moisture out of the air so their basements don't get moldy. It's that same type of a concept, but this one sits on your kitchen counter. It's not hooked into anything, and it takes the ambient water out of the air and actually filters it into good drinking water. And just so you don't think, oh, that's hocus pocus or spooky, the water that comes out of your tap in most areas of the world, in Hamburg, or if we're talking Los Angeles, is allowed to be around 600 parts per million of minerals and different particles in that water to be safe, to be drinkable water to use, right? The parts per million in the air in Hamburg and in LA and in different parts of the world is usually between 50 and 100 parts per million. In Hamburg right now, it's 60. So in LA, it's around 70. Mm-hmm. And so that's even less than what you're drinking. Plus, after we harvest that, then we filter it again mm-hmm. with a form of reverse osmosis, and then you can drink it. And so that's something you can have on your kitchen counter. You're not using any finite water. And so if the water goes bad, or if your power goes out, you can still have 2.5 liters a day, and there's some bigger units you can buy as well. Power walls we sell as well. We sell a Mercedes power walls. We sell solar panels for your balcony, for your roof, for your side, just small things for apartments so that people can get started to think of off the grid. We sell dehydrators so that you can dehydrate your own food. We sell machines that you can do a little vertical garden, a vertical farm in your house, and like a size of a refrigerator or the size of a wine cooler or a bigger refrigerator. We have different shelving units for small families. So there's all different types of little options like that that we sell that you can take home yourself and start to live off the grid and start to produce your own food. And the reason this Aloha Eco Center is kind of good, and it's the transition for the first global food reform on how we really truly produce our food differently, is that there's nobody else in the world doing it. There's no one out there that is 100% using renewable energy, using non-finite resources to produce food, to reduce the emissions in the production, who's using good packaging. And it's time that we do that. So in that Eat Lancet report that I mentioned came out in January, it's one of the main things that they talked about in there is we need to change the way we produce, because if you do it in the right way, it's virtually impossible to produce unhealthy food for humanity.
I love that. That is so futuristic, but as well, I think so empowering that there are actually ways of how we can make this transition work or happen. And I think what I would like you to talk a little bit about, or see, is as well that you're like creating this example, which not only is important for the food industry, but as well you want it to be adapted in other industries as well, right?
Yeah, I do. I really want it to be adapted worldwide. So it's kind of it's very open source and it's transparent. So we want everybody to see how to do it, to empower them to do it themselves. And if there's countries or cities or places in the world, we'd love to help them. Originally, this project started with many partners. It's not just me. It's not, it's many collaborators. I kind of touched on a few of them in the beginning, that Tesla and Panasonic for the renewable energy. And then we have the developers of the facility, our sustainable developers that think in the circular economy way. And we use modern food producers, engineering companies that come together with the latest technologies and innovations to do a different type of real resilient, sustainable food production. And we bring all these partners together, which have all been operating for a long time out there by themselves, but they've never done it all in one big system, collaborating everything together. And that's really the missing link is we didn't leave the Stone Age because we ran out of stones. We left the Stone Age because there's a better way of doing it. Well, there's all these great innovations out there, right? They've existed for years. And now we've got to put them together in a system to really make them work, to flip the switch. And I think that's really what the Aloha Eco Center is. And if somebody would like to do one or has some property or do a different spec, I'd be glad to help them and talk to them and put them in touch with the partners. And it's, like I said, it's open and transparent. So if you want to do your own, you can do it with my help or without. So.
And how do you think, is it possible for really big companies to be more open and receptive to these new concepts and ideas, and really shifting from just, focusing on profits, but really moving into being of service to the people and respecting and honoring the earth?
I'm going to kind of take the big rounded approach to answering that. So a lot of people don't know this, but it's real important to know. There are 10 large companies in the world that own more than 75, it's about 80% of the world's brands of foods. Unilever, Coke, Nestle, Pepsi, Kraft, Mondelez. 10 big companies own about 80% of the world's brands of food. Most of these brands are not necessarily, I love them. I love chocolate and certain things, but they're not healthy. They're not good for you. They've got a lot of aromas, flavors, sugars, preservatives. They're just empty calories. They're not making us healthier. We have a big problem with obesity. We have a big problem with people with obesity dying of malnutrition because there's no nutrients in what they're eating. It's just empty crap. And I don't want to make these top 10 out as the horrific monsters because they're not. They just got stuck in the wrong business model. They got stuck in a business model that's cheap and fast and efficient. That's not how humanity works. We're complex and we need healthy products and we need something that's long-term, that's going to last for a long time. And if you realize that these top 10 companies own the majority of the brands, what that should tell you is it's not a very diverse diet, world diet, or diverse food system. And if anything happens in that process, we've got big problems. So I can tell you I think it was last December, Paul Pullman, who was the CEO of Unilever, and they used to call him Green Paul. He's a sustainable development goal advocate like myself, a good friend, a great guy, and he cares a lot about the world. But Unilever has a lot of bad products. And they also last year diversified their portfolio in a different way. Instead of doing more food products or more sustainable food products, they started to dial down their food products and go more towards cosmetics and shampoos and deodorants and other type of products because they were spending millions, hundreds of millions of dollars every year just because of the problems that the climate catastrophe was creating for Unilever and their production. They feed 2 billion people a day, Unilever alone, 2 billion people a day. And they had a lot of food products, but they were running into $500 million worth of problems because of climate catastrophes affecting their tea products, there was Hurricane Yolanda, Hurricane Haiyan, that in one day wiped out their entire crops, and they couldn't produce a lot of their products anymore because of the climate problems. And so they're like, what can we do? And instead of maybe taking the higher ground and saying, we need to develop some sustainable products, we need to think of different production methods, they dialed it back. And so I think those top 10 companies, if they don't think resilient, if they don't start doing sustainable development, they're going to go out of business. They're going to not be around. They're going to be disrupted and go away. And smart, innovative startups that are disrupting the industry of food and beverages and agriculture will step in and do what's right to take over the mantle and show them what's right. I hope they get the curve. I hope all companies that are big and they get the curve and they understand that that investment is good. And this is one last thing that I thought was interesting with Unilever, because they're where I get the data from. Unilever said for every dollar invested in the sustainable development goals towards nutrition, you get a $16 return.
Wow.
That's 30% of the GDP for 2030. So to say that being sustainable, to have sustainable development is not profitable, is not efficient, is costly, it's just hogwash. It's absolutely absurd. It doesn't make sense. It's actually better business. And one of my friends said it best, as Peter Diamandis from Singularity University and the X Prize, wrote the book Abundance and Bold. He said, the world's biggest problems are the world's biggest business opportunities. If you want to be a billionaire, help a billion people. If you want to be a millionaire, help a million people. That's $1 per million people you help. So it's not very much. Let's make an impact and make this world better. I'm not talking about business or greed. I'm talking about doing things right, doing things for the long term to be sustainable and resilient.
I love that. And how do you think what are the biggest challenges for this transition actually to happen in in your opinion?
Well, like I started out in 2015, we saw the shift and we saw the momentum going. And the first year, the number was in the low 400s of businesses that were getting on board, and the awareness of the SDGs and what needs to happen. Today, the number is well over 20,000 businesses that are on board with the SDGs, and that number is growing exponentially every day of awareness. Last year, we had the IPCC report, which a lot of people can say, oh no, kind of doom and gloom, that they're telling us it's not looking good, we're not on track. But we are. It's not too late. We can do it if we understand that exponential function, the complexity. And I'm seeing these reports coming out, so the awareness is being raised. Some of the comedic articles I sent you, I don't know if you want to share those links. The awareness is being raised, that people are getting there. And then how, even if it's funny, how can we put that into action? How can we understand it better? You almost have to explain it in a way that is funny, so that people can understand that it's not funny, that this is really about our energy source. It's about human life. It's our basic need. Why would we give our most vital energy source to feed ourselves and to protect us and keep us around for future generations, to be sustainable, to 10 big companies? Why would we say, I'm not going to be concerned about what I eat today and leave that up to someone else? I mean, that doesn't make sense. You may have seen that, I grabbed a drink to clear my dry mouth. Mm-hmm. That's my energy source. I need to eat every day. And if I don't, I'm not going to survive. I'm going to eventually get weak, and that's my battery. And so I'm very concerned about what I eat, when I eat, and that I eat every single day. And I want to make sure that I can do that for multiple generations. I want to live a long time. And I think everybody wants to do that. But if that's the thought, why would you leave that up to McDonald's or 10 big companies to say, hey, I'll let them decide what I'm going to eat? That's a bad personal model. That's a bad way of living. We need to really take control of our energy source back into our own hands and make some serious decisions. And there's a lot of, you deal with this a lot more than I do, but there's a lot of consumers or the individual that really feel overwhelmed. They're like, am I vegetarian? Am I vegan? Am I a raw or paleo or ketogenic? What diet do I do? What do I follow? And they really feel this big weight of responsibility. Don't be overwhelmed, because even if today 3 billion people went vegan, it would be one of the world's biggest diets that would ever fail. And I tell you why, is because there's not enough food producers changing the way we produce food to feed 3 billion people at once. Mm-hmm. And that's why the diet would fail, because people still have to work. They still have jobs. They still have this daily routine. And if their boss says, hey, you're 15 minutes late for work because you were making a salad, or you were going to the grocery store, or you're going to the farm to figure out where to get this good, healthy food, that doesn't work for us. You need to be here on time, because that's a time-consuming thing, because convenience is the choice. And so some of us hardcore people like me and you, we would make it, but the majority would fail. We need to make sure that the food producers, or we actively take part in how we produce food sustainably, that it's ramped up so that the whole world can have enough to eat, have good food, and that we change the way we produce so that's not an issue anymore, that we're not affecting our climate anymore. And then the last thing kind of that touches on that is I mentioned the 30% of food waste in the world. Did you know that only 1/4 of that 30% is enough to feed everybody starving in the world? Mm-hmm. Just 1/4 of that 30% we throw away That's enough to feed everybody in the world. So if we were more efficient with how we produce and how we handle and do our food, I think a lot of our poverty and hunger issues would go away. A lot of our things that we have in the Sustainable Development Goals would be resolved. And I see those disruptors and those companies emerging, and the people's thinking about how to take more control of what they eat and where they buy and what they do. So now we need to get it up to the level of the producers so that everybody is a global citizen and equal and empowered to live a long, healthy life.
And from your perspective, what are simple things that each of us, like the consumers, really can do right now to already be part of the change?
I really believe that I really, this is a difficult one because it is very personal to each individual. You know, and as a climate speaker, you get this also, okay, change your light bulbs to LEDs, carry a reusable bag with you all the time. So instead of taking plastic, leave all the plastic at the grocery store, and pack your products, unpack them and pack your products in, and leave all your waste at the grocery store. Shop regionally, locally, go to markets, shop fresh, you know, try to get fresh products. Those are all things that are pretty difficult to do. I think going overwhelmingly to a plant-based diet, not saying fully vegan or vegetarian, but as much as possible to a plant-based diet, reducing any types of meats to just a couple times a month or even less, avoiding sugars, aromas, flavors, and preservatives, those type of things. The bad thing is and I try to mention this with the 3 billion vegans all of a sudden to protest against the top 10 and say, hey, we're going to show you we want different products. Why that would fail is the products that they're making, they have a shelf life of years. So that they could say, go ahead and let them be on that diet because it's going to fail. That doesn't mean that they're going to change the way they produce. I just know the industry and I know how they do it. That's not how it works. Not in this day and age yet. It just doesn't work that way yet. And hopefully it will, but I think the best bet is to realize that those crappy products maybe go into a different niche, smaller part of the grocery store. And then the good products, the organics, the fair trades, the products that are local and regional and fresh and have an extended shelf life, that those become a bigger part of the grocery store so that when you go to buy after work or after your day with your family, that you have some better options to buy and that you don't need to look at labels and read the labels. So you say, hey, there was no label on this apple. There was no label on this orange. There's no label on this celery. It came straight from the ground. It's good. Or this is organic farming or not vertical farming that is almost better than organic because the nutrients and vitamins and minerals, there's no pesticides, chemicals, or preservatives in the way that's grown. So it's almost beyond organics in the way it's produced. It's got more vitamins, minerals, and nutrients. That's a product that doesn't need a label. It's a product that it's a no-brainer. Today, you've got to look at so many labels, what colorings and things are in there. I would avoid anything like that, you know, and packaging that is the consumer's responsibility to dispose. I think one of the biggest crimes in agriculture, food and beverage production is that we have made the consumer responsible to dispose of the packaging. So not only do we pay companies to buy their food from us, but then we have to also be responsible of how we dispose of it. And the majority of the world is all about convenience. They don't separate their garbage. They don't dispose of it properly. They do what's convenient. But if that choice wasn't even there, that they had a recyclable glass bottle or if they had recyclable packaging in the first place, that decision would be a lot easier.
Absolutely. So one more question. I would love you to share your personal secrets. As you are so incredibly busy, how do you maintain yourself a healthy lifestyle in regards to food?
So I have I believe that freedom is in discipline. So I get up very early. I work on my personal knowledge. I read. I try to read a book a week, or gain some knowledge every week that puts me further. I try to stay up to date on the information. But that extra time in the morning that I get up is really time for me to work on my personal health and do a little bit of sport. Because I travel a lot. I have to. I mean, I want to reach billions of global citizens and empower them to live an adaptive lifestyle of health and sustainability. And to be huddled in an office is hard for me to reach a lot of people. And so the more podcasts, the more video talks I do, the bigger audiences I can speak to, and the books that I write, I can actually try to reach these people as much as possible. And that's how I do it. Last year, I can tell you, I spoke at a lot of events, but I only spoke to about 1.5 million people. But I published 3 books and did a lot of video calls as well, which was very nice to raise that awareness, but it's still not enough. And so I don't drink 30 minutes before and after I eat, which helps for my digestion to keep the enzymes in my stomach so that I can digest my food better. I have a plant-based diet that I try to eat a salad a day, if not more. I drink a lot. Me personally, I drink at least 2 liters a day. I have to be honest, I was addicted to coffee, and probably the milk was the worst part in my coffee. And I switched to plant-based milk that I love and would recommend if anybody wants the secret tip. I don't know the company, this vegan, CO2 neutral, they're environmentally friendly producer, but I just love it. And what else do? I also stand a lot. So you notice that I'm standing now. So I've been standing for about 16 plus years now, and burn extra calories every day just by standing. I have good joints and feel good about how I work. I speak when I stand. And so I have to sit enough if I'm traveling in a car or a train or a bus. Sometimes you're forced to sit. If you're at a business meeting or dinner meeting, sometimes people don't want you standing at the table, so you have to sit. Or if you're on a plane, you have to sit. I do carbon swapping and carbon offsetting. I use a company called My Climate to help me with carbon offsetting. I also do events and make sure that I ask every event that I do if they adhere to the ISO 20121 standard, which is sustainable event standard. I mean, it's a long number, but there are standards and things out there that have been in place for a long time. Is that a sustainable event that uses recyclable materials, that does composting, that uses utensils and dishes and plates that have to be washed again instead of disposable cups or plastics and things like that? Do they do carbon offsetting? And that was something I actually learned from Al Gore and the Climate Reality Project. They've been doing that for 6 or more years now. All their events are carbon offset for everybody who attends. And, you know, there's little things like that you can do. What else? I think that's kind of a summary about what I do, but I think that helps. And as you can see, I don't use Miracle Grow on my hair, but I think my hair and my beard is good. So for an old guy like me, I'm still kicking. So it's working.
Okay, awesome. So if people would like to know more about your work, or even get counseling, if that's possible in regards for their enterprise or whatever, where do they find you? How can they connect with you in a different way?
Well, there's two great places. So marcbuckley.earth is my website, and it's a Marc with a C, so MarcBuckley.earth. That talks about, I wear many different hats. So I take a systems view of life approach and do many things, UN, World Economic Forum, Global Food Reformist, everything, because I really want to reach billions of people. And so I need to live in systems. I need to see the world as systems. And that's how we can do things that are resilient and exponential. To just say you're just doing one thing and you're a specialist, that was a very linear, siloed way of looking at the world. And in 2018, the world made a shift. The UN and the World Economic Forum shifted from that linear, siloed approach of addressing problems into a systems way of embracing complexity to solve our global grand challenges. And then the second way for the Aloha Eco Center is adaptive-nutrition.com. And those are my two websites. And I'll even give you a little excerpt out of a book that I launched in Davos in January at the World Economic Forum. I'll give you my excerpt out of that book. It's a nice section that I wrote in the book, and I think you'd like it. And maybe it will encourage you to buy it online. And this is kind of part of the thinking differently. The book's called Moonshots for Europe, and it's chock full of innovations and resilience and thinking about the SDGs and working towards the future and how we can innovate differently and better and kind of do that moonshot for the future. But not only did we talk about it and did some amazing, 20 plus amazing co-authors and contributors to this right in this book, but then we gave everybody who actually got a physical copy of the book an innovation in their hand. And so we put an innovation in their hand because it was printed on rock paper. Rock paper is feels like silk, and it's waterproof. It was printed in a renewable printing facility, using renewable energy and sustainably with organic inks and battery backup. And it's just a really cool collector's item. And I think it's the 10th book in the world that ever was printed on rock paper. There's another great book that came before it from Gunter Pauli, called The Blue Economy, which also talks a lot about resiliency and sustainability. That's also printed on that different material. It's about taking these innovations and these things and applying them to now, not waiting until retirement to start living the good life. Let's start applying these things now so that we can have a nice, sustainable, desirable future.
I love that. Thank you. And so my last question for you is that I ask every expert on the summit is, if you do have one, I would love you to share your personal message of hope to the audience.
I am very, very optimistic and excited about the future. And my hope is really part of my why, which is kind of Simon Sinek's why. And that is, I want to empower billions of global citizens to live an adaptive lifestyle of health and sustainability within our planetary boundaries. And I believe the best way that every human being on this planet has to do that is through our most vital energy source, food. What a better way to do that? And food, agriculture, food and beverages is bigger than the internet. It's the biggest thing that our planet has ever seen. It's the most wonderful economy the world's ever seen, that have built up cities and cultures. And through that knowledge, we can solve this problem and address our global grand challenges and have beautiful, beautiful future. So that's my little bit of wisdom. I mean, I also teach people how to run faster than climate change. That's my other little caveat. So if you want to get to me, get together with me or write me a message or somehow read one of my books, I'll show you how to run faster in climate change and live in a desirable future.
I love that. Thank you so much, Marc, for
You're
being
welcome.
part of this series. I think you're so much great knowledge to share, and I think it's so incredible to see that you not only, it's so many people talk about the why and the goal, but like how do we actually reach that goal? And you are really working and paving the way. So thank you so much for your vision, for your action, and being really a big part of the change and changing the system. And thank
You're
you
welcome.
all.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you all for watching and joining us today. And please, please, please stay tuned for more content on how to eat to improve your health, empower your spirit, and thrive for the planet. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.